Hello, and welcome back to the Listening Librarians. Katie and I are here today to share with you some books that just made us laugh. We figured it's been a really weird winter, a lot's been going on, we need a laugh. So we thought we'd come up with some humorous books, at least ones that tickled our funny bones, to share with you. So, would you like to share your first one?
Sure. So I listened to How Y'all Doin', Misadventures and Mischief from a Life Well Lived by Leslie Jordan.
Okay.
Who is, was, unfortunately, he passed away recently, an adorable actor. And so this was read by him. It's just 4 hours. It was a quick little thing. And they were just like funny little anecdotes, stories from his life, a lot about being on film and TV show sets, but kind of starting with, and not necessarily chronological order, but some about when he first started to get famous. My favorite probably being how he was invited to legendary dress designer Bob Mackey's show. And so he attended, and last second they were like, you should wear one of the dresses. And so no makeup, nothing like that. He just puts on this, these gorgeous gowns, famously worn by some of the biggest like Hollywood starlets, and struts the runway with all of these supermodels. And then he makes like The Inquirer, which was his mother's religious reading. So it becomes this whole humorous story about how his mom was a little like, I don't know what you're doing. And so he was friends with Carrie Fisher, who had her mom, Debbie Reynolds, call his mom. And so it was that was probably my favorite story. So they were very cute. I enjoyed listening to it quite a bit. And, and he passed away just this past October. So, it was a good way to kind of remember his fun life and some of the stories he really enjoyed from it. What did you read?
Well, speaking of actors,
okay,
my first one is Fan Fiction by Brent Spiner. Now, I don't know if you ever watched Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah, I knew the name as soon as you said it.
I watched it a lot when I was in college. We're not going to say how far back that was. But Brent Spiner played Data on the series, the android. But he has a really wicked streak of humor in him, and he's been known to impersonate his fellow actors.
Okay.
And he's got a kind of a quirky story to him. It's fiction, but it is based on experiences he had while acting on Star Trek: The Next Generation, because he had a stalker.
Okay.
And so this is kind of a noir mystery with real people as the characters, like, Brent Spiner is the main character, and this is what's happening to him while he's on set as Data, and someone who is pretending to be Data's daughter, Lal, from a couple of the episodes on the show, sending him really kind of creepy notes while he's on set, something about, I miss you, Daddy, and
oh my.
we'll be happy together when this happens. And it just gets creepier and creepier. So you've got this thriller, which is almost a farce because it's way over the top.
Okay.
He's really trying to tell it sort of that hard-boiled 30s detective style, and he's making cracks with the gorgeous female detective and coming on to her, and a little strange in that regard. But the fun part is that he has other actors from the show come on as cameos to do their own parts.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's like part memoir, part noir thriller, part reunion for the whole cast. And
that's fun.
It's just really entertaining, especially if you enjoy the show, to kind of get those over-the-top stereotypes of the actors behind the scenes. You know, you've got Sir Patrick Stewart now doing the very Shakespearean dramatic actor sort of character.
Yeah.
And Michael Dorn, who is Worf, the really kind of growly kind of guy. It was really very, very funny. And it's about 7 hours long, so it's an easy sort of listen, and just a bit of nostalgia for some of us.
I've seen the cover in a bunch of places as like you need to read this sort of book, and I hadn't investigated it at all, and I'm so glad you're talking about it, because now I'm going to go listen to it too.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it a 5-star read. It's not one of my top reads, but it's very enjoyable. Yeah.
Nice. So, I wasn't sure what other book I wanted to talk about that made me laugh. I talk about David Sedaris already a couple of times here, so I was like, I'm not going to talk about David Sedaris again. So I did a not very researchy thing. I just Googled books that are funny, and I find this book called This Will Be Funny Someday by Katie Henry, and we had the audiobook. It's 10 hours. And I went, okay, I'll listen to this. I read the description. It's about a stand-up comedian. And so I will say there are funny parts, but there's also very serious parts. And it's probably less about the comedy than about this girl's growth. But it was a very good book. So I figured, since other people might think it's funny, and there are humorous parts, that I talk about it. So our main character is Isabel. She's a high school student. And she's the youngest. She has older siblings. They're all in college. Her parents are pretty affluent, powerful, although her mom is an attorney. And so she has always been the quiet, good girl. And her family, without meaning to, as a reader, you know that, is always louder than her. And, talks over her. And then she's got this boyfriend who's even more wealthy. And I will say this, I read a lot of historical fiction, which often has a World War II setting, which means that there are Nazis. So I've read a lot of bad guys.
Yeah.
I hated her boyfriend.
Wow.
So he's very domineering. He's very, this is how you're supposed to act. And like, why would you do that? It's going to make me upset. So right away, I'm like, oh gosh, this book's not funny. But so where our turning point in like the first 10th of the book is when she's actually avoiding her boyfriend. So she's lied to him and said that she's going to study, but she actually just wants to go for a walk and be by herself. And she sees him coming down the street. So she just runs into the first, what she thinks is a restaurant that she sees. And she has an auditory processing issue, and so when there's big crowds, she has a hard time hearing, and so she walks into what she thinks is a very loud restaurant, and she just tells the hostess, put my name down, she'll get a table, and she'll avoid the boyfriend. And it is not a restaurant, it is a comedy club. And so they call her name, and they kind of bring her upstage, and she does the, like, how we all would, like, oh gosh, what do I do? What? And everything that she's wanted to say to her boyfriend, to say to her family, just comes like spewing forth like she's in front of a therapist. Yeah. And she's, for a first timer who did not know she was going to be doing comedy, actually moderately funny. So a group of college students who she does not correct when they also think she is a college student, kind of take her under her wing and like, you're a newbie in comedy, we'll teach you how to be a good stand-up comic. And so there's a lot of friendships that get made. So she does continue in the comedy, and that's where we do get our funny parts, because you hear her monologues that she's going to present. But along the way, she's also, she's growing in these friendships. She's gaining confidence as she does more of the comedy, and ultimately learning to stand up for herself to both the boyfriend. So there's a good ending where we get rid of him. I'll spoil that. And then, being able to speak to her family about her needs as well. So I still enjoyed it, even though I wasn't like maybe uproariously laughing all of the time, but it did have some good funny parts.
Nice.
What about you?
Well, my second book, is kind of a throwback for me. It's a book that was originally published in the 1950s. And it's one that it's a children's book, but it wasn't brought to me. I didn't find it on my own. Somebody gave me a copy until I was in college. And that is The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. It's a classic. And I've always just read it in print because the illustrations by Jules Pfeiffer are just on point.
Yeah.
They're perfect. But this audiobook edition came out in 2019, and it's under 5 hours. It's narrated by Rainn Wilson.
From The Office. Okay.
Yes. So the basic of the story, if you've never read it, is Milo is this bored little boy. He's done everything. He doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to do that. He's just, nothing is fresh and exciting anymore. Until one day, when he goes into his room after school, there's this small package at Tollbooth that he has to put together and put up the signs, and it invites him into another world. So, he gets into his little toy car and drives up to the toll booth, follows the signs, and he's whisked away to the land of Dictionopolis. And along the way, he meets a dog known as the Watchdog because his body is a big watch.
Iconically famous on the cover.
Yes. Yeah. And that's Talk. And he also meets a fellow known as the Humbug. You can kind of imagine what his character is like. And they end up on this quest to rescue the princesses Rhyme and Reason, because there's been this big divide between the two brothers, and one has captured the two sisters and carried them away, and now the lands are just in chaos. So I've never watched The Office. I have to say that. So I didn't really have any idea about Rainn Wilson's acting skills or anything like that going into it. But oh my gosh, he was just perfect doing the different voices, doing the dramatic
I can picture
recitation of all these different things, especially when you had multiple characters saying things all in a row.
Okay.
And it just kind of builds. And you hear this in his voice, and he has not only the voices, but the dry humor behind it to just really make those lines hit perfectly, because there are so many puns, so many plays on words, and so many dry little comments that get thrown in that sometimes it's not until you actually hear someone say it that you really pick it up.
That you get it.
And so there were a lot of times that, even though I've read this multiple times before, he would say something, it would just catch me off guard, hit me the right way, and I'd sit there and laugh and snork and all of that. It was just the most delightful experience.
I have not read that probably since I was in 3rd or 4th grade.
Yeah, you need to go back and reread it. That's one of the children's books that I think every adult needs to read.
For sure.
Because I really think you get more out of it as an adult.
Yeah. Aww.
So, that was just perfect.
Did you have any other funny books you wanted to bring up?
No, that pretty much capped it off. How could I top that one?
Well, yeah. Well, so next month is April, and April is National Poetry Month.
Yeah.
And so we will be talking about books that were written poetically, or our poems, or etc., or our poems themselves, and novels or not. I am excited. Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of good stuff out there, not just your straight books of poetry by known poets, but a lot more, especially middle grade and YA books. We're seeing some novels in verse that are really very well done. They really get to the essence of the story.
Perfect in audiobook form, I feel like. So we will be talking about those next time we see you. Thank you for joining us for this month's Listening Librarians.
We'll see you next time.